Hello, and welcome to Good News Rhode Island, the show about Rhode Island and the people and places and events that make Rhode Island a great place to live, that build our communities. Basically, the show is about altruism, that motivates us to do something that we never even thought of because we see a need or we become passionate about something that we now want to change or impact or we want to experience. And today we're going to be talking to two people who represent a lot of other people in Rhode Island who are working to help teachers in Africa learn how to teach more efficiently and more creatively. So I want to welcome Bill Malloy and Jean Proulx, who are here. Jackie Proulx, I'm sorry. I may call you Annie Proulx. Anyway, who are here to talk about the African Teacher Foundation. And it's a foundation that was started in a very simple way. Bill, you're one of the founders. Why don't you talk a little bit about how this foundation came about?
Thank you for having us, first of all. And I'd be happy to talk about it. I, in 2007, went to join some friends of mine who had taught in international schools around the world. And they were gathering in Nairobi, Kenya, to go on a safari and climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And while I was waiting for everyone to gather, I was asked to go to do a feeding with the Hare Krishna. I thought we were going to do some feedings, perhaps, of elephants and giraffes, which are orphaned. Instead, we went to a school in the Huruma slum. And the slum had about 50 or 60, the school, I should say, in the slum had about 50 or 60 students going to school there. So we fed them, and then we were able to go into the schools and into the rooms and to speak to the teachers. And I went into one classroom and saw a teacher, and she said that all of the children on the floor, because that's where they were sitting, of that classroom, were orphaned. And I asked her how many of them were HIV/AIDS positive, and she said about 1/3. And she told me the story that about 2 weeks prior to that, she had come to school in the morning, and that one of the students was on the floor, and the other students had slept around him to keep him warm because they thought he was ill. And the reality was that he had passed away during the night from HIV/AIDS complications. And she said to me, "Can you help us help these children? We are just concerned citizens who have no education ourselves." And I had retired as assistant superintendent of schools in Fall River, Massachusetts, and had done a great deal of work in professional development and knew many people like Jackie who have done professional development. And Jackie retired as principal of the Attleboro High School, and she had the same experience. And we got people together and we went over, and we've been going over ever since. We have trained 1,000 teachers and reached about 45,000 students through those 1,000 teachers. We're fundamentally working in literacy, mathematics, and in writing.
Okay, let's back up a minute and say, so you have training as a professional administrator as well as a teacher, yes, as you do as well. And so when you walked in and you saw all of these needs, their physical, emotional, educational, cognitive, all these needs, you must have been sort of overwhelmed by the task, or did you say, we can start with one room and teach 60 kids we need to move ahead. I mean, how does the motivation work that says, gee, here are kids dying of AIDS, I know nothing about medical treatment. Here are kids who live in slums or live in garbage dumps or are orphans. I know nothing about that kind of life. How do you put your template on them?
The teachers. I was going to say the teachers themselves help narrow it down, because when we're overwhelmed by all these other issues going on, they'll say, we need to teach more efficiently. We need new methods. We need to know how to do what we're doing better. So they help to narrow down what they need, and then become informed by Chris and Leslie, the people who are developing the curriculum here. Narrowing more on
You have a wide
needs.
team now, is that right? A team who has a lot of experience that you've built up.
We also have a physician who comes with us, and as you say, it is overwhelming. The scope of it can be overwhelming. So you take the parts of it that you can feel that you can concentrate on. We know that students, in our experience here in the United States, is that students need to be healthy before they learn. So the involvement of the health community here seemed to be a very natural progression. And as a result, we work on that, and we have Tom Rocco, he's a surgeon here in Rhode Island, to address these numbers of teachers that we train first. And then we go into the mathematics and the literacy and the writing.
You do wonder how a child could be that ill and no one noticed as they turned the lights out. And so you have to wonder how much is put on. I know a lot is put on teachers here.
Right.
They're asked to do more and more and more and more. That is what we would think of as social services. But there, you have them depending on the teachers for their lives. It just seems that somehow the doctors need to train the teachers to know symptoms even, as well as mathematical skills, as well as literacy skills.
And there is typhoid, and there is diphtheria, and there are other things of which, polio, which is now making a resurgence in East Africa, which Tom addresses as well. It is true. You need to the spectrum of what teachers are responsible for here and in East Africa is overwhelming, and we work on that. We try to give them the tools, and that has been our focus from day one. Was to give them the tools, to the Kenyan teachers, the tools to train other Kenyan teachers. And that's effectively working. We have 16 trainers now. We have 8 in literacy and 8 in mathematics.
So those 16 trainers are going to 3 countries?
Right now, the countries are coming to Nairobi. They do go out to Kisumu, which is in western Kenya, and they go to Kisii, which is in a rural area. And they do some outreach only within Kenya at this time.
Is it the state schools that you're working with, or?
Yes.
We do everything. We work with what we would call slum schools here, and those are private. Those are the national schools. There is compulsory education in Kenya, but some of those students are so embedded. Now, these slums have 1.5 million. Kibera has 1.5 billion. Makuru has 700,000. The children actually can't get out to the roads to get to the public schools, to the national schools, some of them. So they start these, what they call community schools, and what they call informal settlements, which we would call a slum. And our focus to begin with was those, because that's where I went to do the feeding.
Of course,
so
why not?
Right.
Exactly.
But now it has become, we have many teachers from national schools who have come to the training as well. They're eager to know what we are doing.
Right.
They want to know what kind of things the U.S. Is doing in education. Some of this is applicable for them, and some of it isn't. And we tell them that from the beginning. They have to cull out what they think that is good for them, and they're very, very good at doing that. Some of these classrooms have 95 students in the classroom. So when we talk about cooperative learning and breaking into groups, but you can tell.
So you can have the older children helping with the younger children.
Yes. And we should also point out there are 2 primary teachers or educators, I said, Everlyn and George, who recruit and register teachers there who are looking to attend the Institute. And we have a capacity for approximately 100 or 120 when we go over to do the Institute. They could double that if they wanted to. So they send us the names, and they make an effort to get the teachers who are from these, the community schools, the slum schools, people who really have had little access to professional training.
So they themselves may be sixth grade educated, but their goal is to become more educated themselves.
I would say so, yes.
And they're hoping that in doing that, they can help the children do that too.
Right.
The teachers from the national schools must do 2 years after high school. So they consider
So they've
that
all
to be
had
the national schools.
community college level school.
But the teachers in the schools that are in the slums, they have no training.
Right.
So that is a wonderful place to start, it seems to me.
And they know that's where we're putting our emphasis. And so when they're recruiting the teachers, the community schools, I believe, are a priority. I mean, some of the other national schools know about the trainings and know about the institute and want to be a part of it. But the focus is on the community schools.
Let me ask you, what is keeping you from doing 220 teachers at a time? You just don't have the personnel, and you don't have the
personnel,
space.
and all of our funding is done through private donations. We've raised $250,000 over 9 years. We have no corporate support, which is fine with us. I mean, it's working, but that's another level of it. And we have there. I believe that we will. I think, ultimately we are reaching 240 or so because the teachers that we have trained are going out and doing trainings 3 times a year, and they're doing them in those 3 different areas. They're also going to be doing them in Tanzania and Uganda, just based on these very fundamental concepts that we're giving them in the teaching of mathematics and writing and literacy.
And they're eager to spread that. They're eager to share it with their colleagues. And the other issue is the International School of Kenya, which has been wonderful to us, the people there. That's the facility we use. And the space that we're using, I'd say we're about maxed out. We have small group and 1 large group area. But I don't think we could fit more people there. And again, that's the venue we use.
You're talking about also educating parents or supporting parents who are living in what you're calling slums. I think if you describe them, you would say corrugated aluminum with a dirt floor.
Right.
I mean, this is what I saw in Brazil, for example, with maybe 1 electrical socket with all kinds of things coming out of it. I understand what you're saying, and I understand that it seems as though parents would not have the option to be able to parent well, what we consider well. Do the parents tell you what they need to, or do the teachers understand how to help the parents? I'm not sure how a teacher could help.
I'm not sure we've got
parent.
Well, I've met with parents in Mikuru and at the Jovial Community School, and their concern, they understand what education does for their children. And their focus is to try to get them as much education as possible. And although it is mandated in Kenya, it is not necessarily enforced. They just don't have the capacity to enforce it the way we would here. And so many of the students, particularly in those informal settlements or the slums, they do not have the opportunity to physically get to a school. And you'll see that it's very different. We also service some rural schools. And the difference in the rural schools is the girls stop coming at about 10 or 11. And in the informal settlements, the boys stop coming at 10 or 11.
Okay, so there's a sociological shift, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Demographics. So what happens to the boys in the settlements, in the urban areas?
Unfortunately, there's no employment for these boys. So that's where all of the issues that we might have here in urban, the drug issue, I think, becomes significant. The girls are, they're more careful about letting the girls out, and they usually have them in some sort of a residential setting because the girls can become part of the sex trade.
Are you worried about security?
Yes.
You have to be. Even from the start, when I went over, it was 2009. And basically, as soon as we landed in Nairobi, security was an issue in the sense that it was taken care of. I mean, we had a driver, and the place we stayed was a secure home with guards or whatever. It's a part of their life, I guess. And
how about for the girls that are in the rural areas who are coming to school? Is there a security issue for those girls?
No. Not. We service a city, a town, a bump in the road called Rhode. It's about 25 kilometers from the opening of the Masai Mara, and it's all Maasai, the Maasai tribe, and the girls there are they're very safe. I mean, there were more issues out there with cobra and black mambas, the snakes. Those are security issues, but there aren't. I mean, of safety issues. But the security issues are really only in Nairobi and in Mombasa, which is east of Nairobi. We've never actually been out to Mombasa. The troubles in Kenya, other than the Westgate Mall, have been outside of Nairobi. And so we're very careful about where we go. And we have, the International School of Kenya has 24-hour guards. The place that we stay has 24-hour guards. And we've had the same driver for about 6 years now. So we're very, very careful about where we go. And we don't go to a lot of places where there would be a lot of public gathering of Europeans or Americans.
Mm-hmm. When you're looking for students, or when students are looking for schools, how do you begin to educate cultures to say girls and boys need equal education, girls and boys need particular skills in order to get any job? How do you start talking about that in communities where no education is the model and illiteracy has been the tradition?
We have had some very good luck in Losho. I mean, whereas there were no girls going up to grade 10 or 11, last year for the first time we had 2 girls pass the national test and go on to high school. Those were the first 2 girls from that Losho, from that Maasai area, that have ever gone on to high school. So it means to us that it can be done. You have to be vigilant, consistent with it, fortunately for us and for those students, the parents see the importance of it. And out there, it's the chief of the tribe as well. You've got to convince the tribal chiefs that it's the way to go.
You've got a whole different social structure.
That's right.
So it's a tall order.
It is.
I don't think we can pretend to say that we made a big impact overnight on that, because it's part of the culture. Right. And so changing that culture and their perspective, but as Bill said, the message, it's clearly important that we give a very strong message that the equality and the importance of education is unquestionable.
There is a very proud tradition of the Maasai, as I understand it, and it's a very long heritage of thousands of years. And how do they see the integration of education with their tribal values, with their rich heritage that drives them most of the time?
It's a 2,000-year-old, they will tell you, it's a 2,000-year-old culture. And their language is more closely related to Aramaic, which was found in Jerusalem and Palestine 2,000 years ago, than it is to Swahili. And they like to tell you that as well. There are 42 tribal languages spoken in Kenya, which is an issue that we deal with in training literacy. But most of them are vernacular languages. They are only written, they are not written or read, they are only spoken. The Maasai, however, write and read in Ma. So the transition actually is easier for us because the students usually in Nairobi and in certain other parts of the country only start to see words when they start to take Swahili in around age 5 or 6. So in some ways, it's easier out in the Maasai area to do the training.
The teachers are coming to you and they're hearing English.
Yes.
And when they go out, they translate what you said and use the local language, or they're also teaching English?
I always say it's interesting to walk downtown Nairobi. Every single sign is in English because it's what the British have left. And when they left in 1962, they left that heritage and that culture, and no one is speaking English. But every sign is in English. and they get them. They know what they can translate them, and they know all the advertisements. They're all in English. They're usually speaking, if they're with a tribal member, they're speaking the vernacular language, and most of them speak relatively good Swahili.
Yet when we visit the schools, the lessons are being taught in English.
They're required.
They're required to teach in English.
So isn't that strange?
The British, that's the British heritage. The British left that for them, and they've continued it, and it has really helped Kenya, as far as Africa is concerned, be a leading country in Africa because they have the English.
Because they can eventually compete in international discussions.
Absolutely, and when I think it's some of the great moments are when we visit the schools and you see the teachers working with the students. Tight quarters, very tight quarters, but you know, very productive in terms of their speaking English, the children responding, working. It's a fascinating issue because they will tell you that their tribal languages are what they understand and communicate in best, yet the schools aren't, everything's being done in English and they're doing very well with it.
You as educators and as principals of schools are also trying to help the educators, the I don't know what you call them, but anyway, the principals of the schools or whatever, have them think about corporate development and the ways they impact their school because of their leadership. Is that true?
Yeah, the headmasters are very cognizant of the world of commerce. Nairobi is really the central city, and it definitely in East Africa, and other than perhaps Johannesburg and Cape Town in all of sub-Saharan Africa. And so that they see that the importance of the education piece. And there's no real issue there. The issue is just the availability and the consistency in the continuum of having students stay in school until they are 16, 17, or 18. Well, they do. I mean, they have the University of Nairobi. They have the University of Kenyatta. They have some, solid universities and major universities as far as sub-Saharan Africa is concerned in Nairobi. So there is a portion, but the percentage of students is so small that really have access to those universities.
But now the principals are learning how to be principals, the teachers are learning how to be teachers. Exactly. Is that what's happening?
True. The University of Kenyatta has a very large program in teacher education. And that's that 2-year program.
And so you're sort of feeding people into that, possibly?
It's the 2-year program, but remember, they're teaching the pedagogy. They don't necessarily need to have the content. In order to be able to teach you in English, for example, you have to have a background in English. And what we are concerned about often is that the background in the content area isn't there, whereas they may be talking about how to formulate a good classroom and good classroom management, but really what do they have as far as the backgrounds are concerned from the contents. And mathematics is a really good example. Most of them, these are teachers in the national schools, some of them have not had algebra at all. So it's very difficult for them. So for them to grasp some of the concepts. So we keep them for those purposes. We keep what we're doing relatively fundamental because we think that it's important for them and to challenge them as we go. And each time we go, we do, particularly the trainers, we challenge them to think in higher order thinking skills in all of those areas. But right now, it's important for us to just come in on kind of a fundamental basis to give them all an even playing field.
You were talking about using television or using international courses. I know that MIT had taken computers to many different villages in Africa, and therefore that probably there is some receptivity in any of these smaller communities or in the most poor communities. But how do you take your education by television or by computer to many, many teachers?
That's one of the things that we have been concentrating on lately. This year we have done WebEx training 4 times since January 1st. And one of the things we're doing, we're using the campus of the International School of Kenya, which is an American curriculum school. And our teachers go up to the International School of Kenya for the trainings on the days that we do them. But there is a 7-hour time difference, so sometimes that gets a little bit confusing. And out in the rural areas like Kisumu, we have actually, one of the things that we've done with the money that we have raised is to buy them some kind of, something that has a camera, a computer with a camera, so that we can include them. And we now are using...
So you essentially have Skyping.
Yes, yes. But
so
it's better than Skyping.
You can see the teachers, you can see the people, and there's more of an immediacy to the education than...
And we see a tremendous increase in the confidence of the trainers through this training. And they talk more, they have more of a chance to talk about their own experiences when they're going out to schools or to areas and they're doing training. Sometimes they're in the fields, just sitting in a field in the more rural areas, training a group of teachers. But wherever they are, they come back with, you know, this teacher asked this question, how would you have answered that? And so that, I have found the WebEx to be extraordinarily helpful. And that's
may continue it all summer even, excuse me for
Yes, I just wanted, I want to plug the University of Rhode Island for that.
Okay, so URI is participating in this as well.
School of Education at the University of Rhode Island.
Okay, but you're looking for volunteers, so people who will go over. Is that true or not?
Well, we're looking for volunteers, but we're looking for people specifically in literacy and mathematics and in writing. So it is a real specific area. We have done differentiated instruction. We have done some other areas, but right now we've decided to go back to just the fundamentals and try to get those across. And we've also done theory. I've done theory with them, learning theory. But right now, we're kind of concentrating on just the literacy and the mathematics and the writing.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think some of that has grown out of the fact that when we went over and did differentiated instruction and some other methodology things, as Bill said, we've come to find out what they really need are the content areas. Exactly. The content area, subject area.
We needed to do that to find out where we needed a baseline. So for the first couple of years, it was a baseline.
Of course, it was an experiment.
Now it's really,
now you're settling into a pattern.
Literacy, mathematics, the writing. That's really the focus now.
Well, I want to thank you, Bill Malloy and Jackie Pruill, for being here. We admire what you're doing, and we certainly hope that people will look at your website, which is Africa Teacher Foundation, but that people will look at it, see what you're doing, watch the movies, the videos that are there, and find out more about you, and maybe contact you at URI, is that correct?
They can, or right online, the Africa Teacher Foundation.org.
Right online, they can contact you as well. Absolutely. So we wish you all the best, especially this summer in your WebEx classes. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching Good News Rhode Island. There really is great stuff happening in Rhode Island, and you're helping to do it. Thank you.